Good Choices, a holistic conversation about dance, art, and life with Sabine Parzer. Hello, everybody. This is another episode of Good Choices, a holistic conversation about dance, art, and life. I'm Sabine Parzer, and I'm very happy to have Alicia Grayson as my guest today. Alicia has been called a medicine woman healer. She is a dancer, teacher, and performer of contact improvisation since 1989. She is a life coach, a somatic psychotherapist. She teaches biodynamic breathwork and trauma release. She also teaches yoga and Pilates and authentic movement. She has been active in engaging in different performance projects, in organizing labs and festivals. She has taught at several universities internationally, at many festivals and institutions. She currently lives in Boulder, Colorado. Her main quest and passion in life is embodying her essence and supporting others in embodying theirs. I'm very happy to bring to you a podcast episode with Alicia Grayson. Hello, everybody. This is Sabine Parzer, and this is an episode of Good Choices, a holistic conversation about dance, art, and life. I'm here today with my dear friend, Alicia Grayson. Alicia is a dancer, a teacher, and a performer of contact improvisation since 1989. She is embodying her essence and supporting others in embodying theirs. She also has a website which is called Embodying Essence, and I would very much like to talk about that with her. Alicia is a life coach. She's a somatic psychotherapist. She also works with biodynamic breathwork and trauma release. She's a contact teacher, a yoga teacher, Pilates, and an authentic movement teacher, which we share in common. Alicia has taught improvisation and contact improvisation internationally at universities and at different festivals and institutions, and she currently lives in Boulder, Colorado. Hi, Alicia. I'm so happy to see you.
Hi, Sabine. So good to see you too.
As usually when I know people really well, I try to figure out when we first met. I have a very strong memory of meeting you at the Contact Festival in Hungary when we shared a room during the festival. Do you remember that?
Yes, I absolutely remember that. Yes, that was what just flashed in my mind, was that sharing the room there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think that was 2008.
I don't remember what year.
Yeah. It was it was such a little community because we were all staying in a hostel, and Sarah Shelton Mann was there, and and all the other teachers, and it was just like this little hub of a community. And I just remember retrieving to my room and then having these wonderful conversations with you back then. And for me, that was also when our friendship started.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. Alicia, you are such a versatile person. I mean, you work really, I would say, in two major fields, or you also combine these two fields, which is something that's also very much to the core of my work, which is on the one hand, dance as an art form, but also healing, coaching, therapy. And I'm really interested to talk to you about merging these two. Where is it sometimes more on the one end of the spectrum and sometimes on the other end of the spectrum? But before we go there, I would really love to introduce you as a person. I would love to hear a little bit about your story, where and how you started dancing and how those early experiences shaped your life.
Well, I thought very early on, I thought dance was just ballet, and I wanted nothing to do with it because I didn't want to wear pink and dresses. And then I had a modern dance teacher in, I don't know when it was, first grade or something, and I did not like her personality, and she had a little chihuahua in a basket that she'd bring to the dance classes, and it would try and bite you if you got too near. So that really turned me off of dance. However, when I was a teenager, I remember just loving to boogie dance and feeling, wow, this is a way I can express myself that I couldn't with language because I was very shy. So that was, I think, where I really, and also contra dancing and square dancing. I love that right from the start.
I think for our European listeners and viewers, you have to explain contra dancing and square dancing.
It's like folk dancing. It's like folk dancing. Yeah.
I think square dance is with country music, or is that specific musical style?
It's like fiddle, like a violin, but with a more, playing not in a classical way, but
it's steps, right? It's specific steps that you learn and
It's
repeat.
steps.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you're doing it in a group of 4 or more. Yeah. So, let's see. And then when I got to college, I decided to take some modern dance classes, and it was extremely difficult for me because I couldn't follow steps. So a lot of the times I was in tears in classes. However, a friend of mine introduced me to contact improvisation, and that was 1989, and I really took to it.
Do you remember where it was?
Yeah, Santa Cruz, California. Yeah.
And did you go to a jam or to a class?
I took a class.
Okay.
I took a class. And I'm going blank on my first teacher's name right at the moment, but she was awesome, still is awesome. It may come to me later.
She obviously left an impression on you.
Yeah.
So was it like an immediate spark or an immediate falling in love with the form, or was it just like, oh, there's something completely
well, I was actually working on doing farm work then, on organic farms. So it was at the end of the day and I was physically exhausted. So I remember coming to class, falling asleep a lot or almost wanting to fall asleep. But there was something about it that I stuck with. And then I did move to Virginia a couple years later, took a modern dance class at a local university, and the guy who taught it, Brad Stoller, he was bringing contact into it. I was like, oh yeah, this thing I love. And we ended up for 10 years dancing every week together.
Wow.
So he was a huge influence, and it was, I think, just because I took this modern dance class as a community member, it reintroduced me to contact, and then that's when it really took off. I started going to the local jams and going to workshops and studying and really diving into it in a big way.
So do you remember your first physical sensation when you were in these early experiences of doing contact? What was, obviously you didn't have to learn steps, but what was it that was so delicious about it?
Oh, well, the fluidity, the compression, the weight, the co-creation. It's all the things I still love. And I just remember so many times with Brad, we didn't hardly talk. We just communicated through the dance. And at the end of the dance, we go, that was great. See you next week. We wouldn't talk because so much happened in the dancing.
Fabulous. So from the beginning on, you had a very long-term committed dance partner relationship. 10 years, that's a really long time. Yeah. No, that was, I think a huge part of my formation as a dancer was having that regular commitment with somebody else who just was super passionate about the form, and we would dance. There were some years where, because he stayed at my house because of work, he lived a couple hours away, and we would get up at 7 a.m. and dance in this church in the little local town.
And then we go off to our work and go, okay, see you next week. Have a great week. Um, so there was a big commitment from both of us and passion.
And since I know a little bit about you, I also know that, I mean, you have really long-term dance partnerships. I mean, you've been living in Boulder, Colorado for how many years now?
Yeah, I actually live outside of Boulder, up in the mountains, near a town called Netterlin, and I have been dancing with a group called Tumble Bones for 16 years.
And you meet regularly, right? You meet regularly?
Yeah, we meet every week.
That is amazing.
Although the pandemic has changed things a bit, but yeah.
But that's a very long, committed research time where you really get to know each other and practice the form. I mean, I think there's something that happens really over time when you get to not only dive into something so regularly, but also where you change in it, where you are able to change physically or emotionally, or, I mean, you've done so many trainings also. I mean, I would imagine in those 16 years, so much has happened in each of your lives, so that it is really sort of this constant denominator, and you keep on moving with that. It sounds really beautiful.
Yeah, it is quite something to witness, to reflect back on when we first started dancing with each other and how it's evolved since. Yeah.
Just to go back a little bit to your early story, you grew up on a farm with your family?
Yeah, in part on a farm. Yep.
And is it as romantic as one might imagine?
Well, I love the farm. I love nature. The animals and just having the nature sounds and smells and being outside all the time. So in that way, yes, very romantic. I mean, there's also lots of work to be done and complexity of as an older person when I lived on the farm, of making it all work and making the family relationships work and all that. But it was a huge influence on my life.
And do you feel like it has shaped your relationship to nature? I mean, it seems kind of obvious, but is it still something that is important to you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think I was just born to not love living in cities, and I loved living in nature, and it's been that way ever since. I mean, I don't thrive in a city. I thrive in nature. And I think a lot of the principles I focus on in dance are mirrored in nature.
Could you elaborate?
Yeah, well, in contact improvisation, we worked so much with the physicality of ground and rebound, for example, and that is evident in the plants everywhere, of their roots and then their extension and out into space is one example. And then, for example, flow with water, just the witnessing of the flow of water in nature, in streams and rivers and the waves in the ocean is such a teacher in how we can be in our own bodies.
I haven't been to visit you in the place where you're at, but I've heard about your house and I've heard about the place, but there's also a certain amount of roughness to it. As far as I know, Colorado, I mean, the mountains they're not always it's not always comfortable to live in nature, and it's not always comfortable to be in our bodies also. I mean, there's a certain amount of challenge to also navigate ourselves with environment whether it be an environment of being with somebody else or in relationship with somebody else, but there's also um, a relationship that is kind of real also about nature, especially when you live in not just on the beach with the sun every day.
Right.
You are in a place where there's a lot of snow. There's no snow right now, which is what I heard from you. But how does it affect you? How does it affect your physicality also that you live in I would say in the mountains where there's not always sun and warmth?
Right. Well, the first thing that's coming to me is something around commitment to showing up regardless of what the weather's like or what the conditions are like. So, for example, I try to go outside every morning and do a morning practice. So I went out this morning and it was quite windy, cold wind. So I got my hat, my mittens, and my down coat, and I do my morning movement practice outside. And so I think there's something about that, that it's not necessarily soft conditions, that it's sometimes harsher conditions, but showing up anyway, then actually you meet life. And I feel like sometimes, I don't feel like going to dance maybe, or I don't feel like showing up, but I show up anyway, and then you meet what's there. So that's the first thing that comes to me when you ask that question.
Beautiful. Yeah. You studied environmental studies at University of California. How did you transition into making a profession out of teaching dance, offering yourself the way you offer yourself to the world now? How can I imagine those early years in Alicia's life? Was there a time when you really said, okay, this is what this is a decision that I have to make to fully commit myself to this path? Or was this a gradual sort of development?
It was more gradual and organic, I would say. I moved back to Virginia to the family farm, and I was helping run that, and I was doing some environmental work there.
How old
and
were
that's
you?
when
How old were you then?
I was, that was 1991. And that's when I connected with this friend, Brad, where we danced every day, and then I started going to local jams and such. And then somebody asked me to sub a contact class, and that was the beginning of then offering a weekly class and then going to places and studying with different people. So it was a gradual transition. And then I took a yoga teacher training and then several and so on. And so it became, gradually more and more of a focus was the teaching movement. Yeah.
Was there ever a time when you had to make a decision? I don't know if you financially, if you were making your money off of farming or environmental work, or was there ever a place or was that so gradual that you didn't even notice it?
It was more so gradual. I didn't even notice it.
Okay.
Yeah, it was very gradual because I had multiple jobs. Yeah, it wasn't like I was just doing one thing. Yeah.
Your website is called Embodying Essence, and when I look at when I look at all the elements that you bring together, my heart just kind of goes, oh. That's me, but I love that, and I love that about you also when I work with you. I mean, we've been co-teaching for quite some time now, and I feel so at home with you as a co-teacher because I feel like we share we share real commitment to physicality and embodiment, which is also a word that I would like to talk to you about. But really sharing a trust also in the physical, full-on exploration of what this physicality can do. But you also bring to the work an enormous amount of emotional and spiritual perspective and training also as a body psychotherapist, and with all the trainings that you have been doing. Do you feel like any of anything on that spectrum is something that you most identify with right now, or is it just a movement where you sometimes move to this end of it and that end of it, or it all sort of interweaves in your work anyway, or is it do you know what I mean? Like, do you have to focus on something specifically, or is it all present at all times anyway?
Gosh, well, that's a huge question. I think there's, and you mentioned it early on, that even for you, your focus is partly the healing aspects and partly more the expressive and creative. And that's very much true for me. And there's times dancing when it just feels like pure expression and creativity. And I'm not interested in the, not least in the foreground of the healing aspects. And then there's other moments, I should say, where the healing is in the foreground, because I do work with people in somatic psychotherapy and with trauma release, and it's very body based, and so I feel like there's these two kind of ends of the spectrum, and then there's a whole area of gradation in between. And I think that's the ongoing curiosity and journey for me, is seeing how these get woven together. And sometimes one, like a color in a tapestry, is like really in the foreground and really bright, and the other may be receding, but they're ultimately super interconnected and influence each other.
Beautiful. We could do this many lifetimes, right?
Completely. Yes.
I can, but I imagine you also can. So rich, right? There's so much richness and so much nourishing information. I mean, I sometimes feel like if I shift my focus more on the compositional elements or the creative elements, that healing just kind of happens on its own, or it just kind of like creeps in without having its focus. But because I'm there, or because participants come who are similarly sort of like-minded, they will also find healing qualities within that. And then at the same time, I find it also, if I'm like thinking of my bodywork sessions, sometimes I feel like that's just art also. I mean, you can have a compositional sense when you do a healing session, both verbally or physically in a bodywork session. I think is so lovely to see how it's not separate, but sometimes it needs different attention, or it needs a different setting also.
Right. And also, I think there's, it depends also, being in a teacher/therapist role, sometimes the work on the healing level then supports the expressive, the expression that can come out that may not otherwise be so free to be expressed. I'm just thinking of some people in particular right now that, that because of their history, they have more or historically have had more limitations in their ability to express. And as they start to heal, that starts to open up more and more, and then the creativity can flow more.
And that needs a safe space. And I think,
Absolutely,
yeah,
yeah.
and with a therapeutic background or at least some training in it, I think there's a space holding quality that emerges, that gives freedom to more creative expression. I mean, it's sometimes quite that simple, but it's also something that I feel like I'm receiving that feedback very often, that people are
Hmm.
feeling safe in a way to also dive into their inner worlds, which is often also, of course, the basis for an expression on a artistic level. But we sometimes forget that,
Right.
or we sometimes, I think, with all these years of doing art for art's sake, I think that was always something that bothered me, is that it kept on being so focused on presenting something to the outside, or being so focused on sort of an outer image of what this might have to be, and that if we include the inner body, if we include a feeling body also, not just the somatic world, but also an in-depth permission to feel and include also the subconscious. I mean, if we're talking about including the practice of authentic movement, I mean, so much of this also working
Mm.
with unconscious elements, are working with archetypes, working with parts of ourselves that we don't know, or we might don't feel so comfortable with. And so
Yeah.
when you are as a teacher, or when you are as a therapist, when you are just simply aware of that space, I think we also give permission to our participants to dive into those areas. Would you agree? Or do you think it's more complicated that
Yeah, and I think it doesn't even need to be explicit.
yeah,
Sometimes it's
yeah,
just the energetics of
yeah.
people feel safe because they know you you've been there. You understand
Mm,
on a cellular level.
mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
It doesn't even
Um,
need to be spoken. Yeah.
yes, yes. People feel that
Mhm.
energetically, for sure.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You write in your bio about a heartbreak that you had in your life. I don't know if you want to talk
Mhm.
about that, but it sounded like it was a catalyst in your life.
Mm.
I don't know if you want to share that, or if you want to share how it propelled you on your journey, and the trainings that you've
Mm.
taken, or in the changes that you've made in your life.
Right. Yeah. Sure. Um, yeah. This was about over 10 years ago, and I was with a person that I thought this I would be with for the rest of my life. We
Mm.
shared a lot of things, including the love of dance. And the relationship ended suddenly, and I was heartbroken. And it was the perfect key for me to open the unprocessed, the unattended to wounds in myself,
Mm.
which was quite a journey over a number of years. And actually, I had just signed up for a couple of somatic psychotherapy trainings right before the breakup happened, so the timing was perfect. Um, but the essence of it is um, it really comes back down to self-love. And pretty simple. It wasn't a simple journey to get there, but um, so having gone through that real dark night of the soul of um, really not wanting to be alive at times, and
Mm.
um, learning how to befriend myself and love myself in a way that I didn't even know wasn't there before. I just didn't know. Um, and that this person who I literally wanted to kill at some points, I eventually completely forgiven and forgave, and that there was nothing about him that changed. It was completely about me. So as I work with people now, because of going through that, I know deep in my cells that transformation is completely possible for everyone. And it's so worth it. It's so worth it. Because holding on to hate or resentment or any of that has actually not much to do with the other person. It has to do with yourself. Yeah. And when you meet that in yourself, then so much opens up.
Yeah. And again, we're back to commitment.
Mm-hmm.
Commitment to the process and commitment to self. When we co-teach, you have also, we have included something that you propose in your work also, which is somewhat of a contract when you enter a process. And I also see it on your website that you write that if somebody comes in and wants to work with you and does not want to give up being a victim or blaming others, you will not work with them. How can you tell if somebody is in a victim role and doesn't want to get out of it? And what do you do with somebody like that when you work with them in coaching or in teaching dance?
Well, I think one is if somebody's not noticing it in themselves, to bring attention there. And then if they're willing, to notice and shift, then we can keep moving forward. But if they're attached to being a victim, then that's where I'm just not interested in working with that person. If that's more important than actually looking at the truth or growth to them, then but if somebody comes to me, then there seems like they want some help, So usually then they're able to go, actually, the part of them that can see bigger can go, okay, yes, I don't want to do this anymore. I don't want to be in victim and blame.
If we're talking about trauma, which is such a big word, and it's also, talked about in many different levels, same as the word embodiment, but trauma is a very popular topic, which I think is really important. But if we're talking about the role of the victim, I think there's different stages to dealing with discovering or healing trauma. And I think sometimes it's really difficult to sort of walk the line with somebody who has been traumatized, and to also kind of feel the pain, really feel the pain and also the anger around having experienced something like that, and staying in the role of the victim or staying in the role of giving up power. It's quite specific, but would you agree that this is a very fine line to navigate people through?
Yeah, sure. Because of course you don't want to blame the person who was victimized and perpetuate that. And it's really about helping that person reconnect with their own autonomy, sense of their own power, getting them resourced enough that they can actually then meet the trauma and move it through their system so that their psychophysiology isn't in the trauma vortex of the loop.
How do you get them resourced?
So, how do you get them resourced? Well, one way is helping the person I'm working with to see if there's a place in their body that feels good or relaxed or safe or calm. And if that's not possible for somebody, then an external resource. Maybe it's something visual, like something that they enjoy looking at, or maybe it's an animal they have. or even a memory of a time they felt good in themselves.
So it's quite present. It's quite something that's here. Like if we're talking about the body, it also brings us into the present moment. So grounding in something that's also maybe physically, like if we're talking about the body, it's also something that I can hold or touch. Like if I'm talking about my heart or my belly or even my knee, it's something that I can see and I can touch. And so it kind of brings me also into the present moment.
Yes. Yes.
This word embodiment, I don't know how you feel about it. I mean, I use it in my descriptions. I even have a holistic dance embodiment training, which is the second part of my teacher's training, because I include more of the big topics, archetypal topics in it. But I encounter it on so many different levels, and I encounter it in so many different areas. And I'm really, really wondering, what do people mean? Like if we're talking about embodiment, if I talk to you or some other dancers and body psychotherapists, I feel like we have such a different sensibility around it than if I just even talk to a psychologist who is primarily busy with words. Or if we're talking about embodiment, I mean, there's so many, it's been used on so many different levels. How would you describe it, what we do or what you do as a body-based psychotherapist or as a contactor? How does embodiment articulate itself? What does it need to thrive? What are its benefits? But what is it that we're doing here? Maybe also to what's different to just a language-based sense of embodiment.
Yeah. I love the word, and it also feels like it's way overused.
Yeah, totally.
So
I include myself in it. I feel like I need to stop using it or define it more. That's partly why I'm asking you also. It's like,
right. So what comes to me when I think and feel into the word is inhabiting the body. And inhabiting with sensations. It's like instead of the brain just being in the head, the brain being in the entire body. And the brain that includes our ability to sense and respond, and the intelligence of the body to be awake to what's happening in the present moment. So to be to be attentive, to let the body be attentive to what's happening, and then allowing one's responses and choices to be congruent with the intelligence of the whole organism of the body.
now, doesn't that look very different on very different people? Exactly what you just described, inhabiting the body, fully allowing an organic self to be here and to articulate itself, but doesn't that look very different or shape itself very different with different people?
Yeah, I was just thinking when you said that, I was thinking about, okay, there may be people who are meditators and their focus is embodied meditation. And so, like for example, Vipassana meditation, where you're noticing, different sensations in the body. You're scanning your body and noticing. But you're not taking that into movement or to responding with the physicality of moving the body, versus dancers or even contact improvisers. Here we are we're noticing what's happening in our own bodies, but then we're responding with other bodies in space. So those two ways of embodiment might look really different. And then I think about embodiment in the more of the psychotherapeutic realm of where you can really, again, get information about what are your feelings, what is the emotional state, what is the energetic state by tuning into the body. And then letting that be also expressed, but not necessarily in a creative way, in just a more of a interactive relational way.
I just have an image of, some of the, I've been doing contact improvisation for 25 years. I think you've been doing it even longer. And there have been so many different moments in my life where I felt so completely alive on a cellular basis, where my head is just a part of me. Like thoughts are just streaming through, but my awareness is in my spine, is in my belly, is in my shoulder, is in my cells, is in my organs. And so I think part of my quest is to describe the depth of possibilities that we can experience our bodies, that embodiment can mean such an aliveness and such a also ability to be response able when we dance, we in contact. So much about being alive to the inputs that we receive from the outside without having to think, or it's even it's faster than our thinking. It's just more in the afterthought. It's like, oh, that was cool, but we're actually already in the next moment. You know exactly what I'm talking about. But
totally.
there's this juiciness to it, and this also, I feel like, I know this word is also loaded, but it's almost like a tantric quality, and not tantric in the sense of sexuality, but so alive, so oscillating in its energy, that it's both physical and energetic, and it's not a place that is easy to get to. It takes a huge amount of awareness and a huge amount of practice.
Right.
But it's amazing. It's like how I think that's why we do it, and that's why we like to share it.
Right.
Because it's I think that's the word, it also has an ecstatic quality to it. Not always, doesn't have to be, or can be, doesn't always have to be a young ecstasy, like this high acrobatic ecstasy. Sometimes it's also a yin quality, which is very soft and internal. But I think the possibility for that sort of aliveness is just, I think that's for me missing in the word embodiment as it is used in sort of a generic way. And I feel like we have access to that through the work that we do.
Right. And what came to me as you were sharing there was something around timelessness, of where time, linear time just completely fades away, and time expands so that anything actually is possible. Or that's when I'm in that kind of state that you're describing. That's what it feels like. That anything is possible in any moment, because you're in that creative zone of such attunement and expanded perception that people might say that's what a spiritual experiences, and for me that's what it is. Sometimes it's a very embodied spiritual experience, even though I don't necessarily use those words. But I think it may be pointing at the same thing that people sometimes access in other ways.
We're kind of getting towards the end, but we still have a little bit of time. You particularly work also with active witnessing. You work with authentic movement, which is a love that we share. But you also particularly work with active witnessing. And do you feel like first, can you describe it, what it is? And secondly, do you feel like that might be also a way of bringing both that deep embodiment, that deep physicality together with an emotional awareness or an emotional presence, what we were talking about, that in-depth exploration that also requires or also includes a physicality? So it's a two-part question.
Right. Well, active witnessing is a subform of authentic movement. And classically, it's done in trios where there's a mover, an active witness, and a sitting witness. And however, when I work with clients sometimes, it's just the mover, the client, and me as the active witness, where I may be bringing in touch as well as just this quality of witnessing what's arising through them, through their movements.
As an active witness, you have your eyes open or closed?
Yes,
yeah,
open.
So just to explain it, just for people who don't know authentic movement, I'm going to do a very short version of this. But
Okay,
it's a dance therapy form that comes from a Jungian background where you have a mover and a witness. And in its classical form, there is a dyad where you have one person moving with his or her eyes closed and one person witnessing who is sitting in one place and listening to him or herself while seeing somebody else move. So active witnessing is actually an extended form of this because you have a third person, and that third person has his or her eyes open but is also moving, and they're responding to the mover. Or can you explain that just a little bit further?
Yeah, there's a kind of a spectrum of how an active witness may be. So in the whole form, everyone is witnessing themselves. There's that part. And as an active witness, not only you're witnessing yourself and your own impulses, but you're in holding a space for the mover. And how that is different than the sitting witness is that you're moving. So the mover may actually want to interact with you. And so they may, for example, want to push up against you, and you can be there for them to push up against, or they may want to pull, or they may want to be held, or so it becomes more relational. And so a lot of relational pieces can arise from having an active witness. And yet we're not, we're letting the body and the unconscious drive it rather than talking about something and trying to figure it out. We're just allowing that.
Or aiming to create an artistic form or even a interesting dance that's not in the foreground.
Right. Exactly.
Sounds wonderful.
Yeah.
I know we've been doing it quite some time, but I also know that we include it in our workshops, but I also know that you have really committed to that form, and I love it because it feels like it's merging different aspects of the work. Now, Contact is turning 50 next year. What is your wish for yourself within the form, and what's the wish for you for the community?
Wow, great question. For myself within the form, that I I keep doing it and loving it, and that's how it's been for 33 years for me. So that as my body changes, that I keep doing the listening. That is so that I'm doing the form in a way that feels really delicious and for my body. So that's the personal, and I have no doubt with that. And then as far as for the larger contact community, that I love how it keeps evolving, and I love that its roots are in physicality, and that that keeps being the center of the form, of the relationship to gravity, the finding the physics is the foundations for the creativity to happen, because the physics creates safety. And so when I see people doing the form that it isn't based in that, it feels like something's missing. And so I trust in the evolution that the physics will always be kind of the center of the form. Where's the ground? What's our relationship to the ground? How do we feel the ground through each other? Those sort of principles. Then, and to me, that's like part of embodiment, because we're creatures of the earth. So we can't pretend that we're not. That's a very basic quality that is central to us as humans on the earth, but also is central to the form of contact improvisation. So keeping that as a base, as a basis, and then I'm just curious to see where it keeps evolving. Yeah.
I think it's great that you mentioned the word embodiment again, because I feel like that's really at the key point of it all. And maybe over the years we can come up with another autonomous term. Right now we're using it and sharing it with other areas. I think I feel like maybe there's something we can emerge like another term for it that is more specific to the in-depth physicality that we work in. I love that about you, and I love that about your work, that you have such a capacity to expand and to expand your scope and expand your heart also. I always feel like you have such a big heart when I meet you and when I see you working with people. In your description there is also this word medicine woman healer that came up, and to me you are a healer. And it's beautiful to see you healing with your body, through your body, and through your presence in your body. And I thank you for that, sharing that you share that with the world, and that you share it with me.
Yeah, and I feel like we have such similar paths, and it's so beautiful to see what you've been doing with your work in such powerful ways. Yeah, you're an inspiration.
Oh, thank you. Okay, so maybe this is a good time to announce that we're going to be co-teaching during Easter in Vienna. It's from the I have to read it, 13th through 18th of April in 2022. So we'll be teaching our Dancing Embody Transform, which is a collection of contact improvisation, authentic movement, somatic work, all around the focus of transformation. Alicia, it's such an honor to be your friend and to work with you. And thank you so much for the wisdom that you shared.
What a pleasure. Always love connecting with you. And super love when we can connect in person,
Yeah.
but this is the best next thing.
Bye-bye. See you soon.
Bye.
Ciao.
Ciao.
If you would like to know more about holistic dance and the Holistic Dance Institute, please visit us at our website www.holistic-dance.at. Holistic dance is an invitation to transformation through dance, movement, and touch. It was founded by me, Sabine Parzer, in 2010. It is a mix of different methods, a dynamic cross-method approach from dance pedagogical, dance and body therapeutic, systemic and holistic methods. We offer authentic movement, integrative contact improvisation, somatics and applied anatomy, improvisation, ecosomatics, and many more elements. I offer holistic dance workshops, I offer single sessions, I offer teachers trainings, embodiment trainings, advanced teachers tracks, year groups, and retreats. I would be very happy to see you at one of our events. And if you have any questions, please write me an email.